Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast, where we talk about trends and lots of other things on how to grow your business. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
And we are Spark Partners, proud to be here every week with lots of things to take your business to the next level. A lot of the times what we talk about is very sort of counterintuitive things, but in the end, when you look at what they actually produce, they are right on point. And today, Adam, it is a hot day here in Tucson. It's 106, which of course it will get hotter. It does get about 115 here every once in a while. And I know you just got back from Vegas, right?
I did.
So one of the things we want to talk about today is, again, we tend to bring politics into the conversation or bring other things because it matters to business. And one of these conversations that we're having today, and especially in these hot days, is this whole idea of climate change. And you've got a lot of things happening in Washington. You've got a lot of things happening across the world, but there seems to be a kind of a counterculture of what's happening. So we want to bring this perspective that really comes at this from the business standpoint. So Adam, I'm going to take that ball and pitch it in your direction in hopes you get a home run. Go.
Well, I think what we want to do is tie this to some headlines. The Great Britain this week scored a temperature of 40 degrees Celsius. This is one of those temperature markers around the world. 40 degrees Celsius is about 104 degrees in Fahrenheit. And in this program, we'll talk in Fahrenheit because most of our listeners are in the United States. So they're setting record temperatures. The daily temperature recording in the UK is 150 years old, never reached 40 degrees. Doing it twice this week. They have not such accurate, but pretty accurate records going back 350 years, never reached 40 degrees. So, this is really quite phenomenal to have gotten this hot. Even though, let me go ahead. It's beyond that, it's also very, very tough in Europe. Spain's having record-setting temperatures. There are wildfires raging across Spain and France these days. You're having over 100-degree days in places that have never had that anyone ever knew of to ever have 100-degree temperatures. And as you said, when we were younger, you and I, we grew up in warm climates, but we didn't live in 110 every single summer. That was still, 50 years ago, very unusual to hit 110 degrees. Now, if you're going to live in Phoenix or Las Vegas or Tucson or Palm Springs, you are going to see 110 every single summer. The planet is getting warmer, and we keep trying to do something about it. And the president's talking about declaring a climate emergency so we can do something. But what that does is it triggers inside of me, why do people still deny that there's climate change, and why is it so hard to do anything about it? Here we had a bill that was set up. It was a budget bill. The Build Back Better failed, and because of that, we didn't pass any climate alterations or any laws to change our approach to climate warming. And then we took and put a bunch of that climate stuff inside the budget bill, and now not a single Republican's willing to vote for it, denying that there's a climate problem that we need to do anything about. And you have Joe Manchin, the Democrat, who said, "No, I'm not going to vote for it either." And, a little bit of further investigation, you recognize that Joe Manchin, his family has coal interest. He's from West Virginia.
Where's he from?
West Virginia, which is a coal state.
Coal country.
So what we see, and you kind of look at this and say, well, okay, it's easy to just say, well, it's a coal state, don't do anything. But really, I believe the people of West Virginia, I bet it's hot in West Virginia, and I bet the people in West Virginia mostly recognize that there's a climate change problem. So you get into, well, why can't we seem to do anything about it? And, of course, that was where my research started back in 1998. The stuff we talk about now, how to go out and be successful in business, started with research I was doing around why people weren't successful, why when people were confronted with change. Mostly in those days it was technology change I was interested in. Here comes the internet, here comes these new technologies, and why were you sticking with the old technology? Why were you refusing to go interact with your customers and your suppliers on the internet? Why were people so slow to adopt new technologies was where I started. And so it led me down a journey that I think we can cover now and help people understand in the world of climate change how people and how businesses react. So at the first level, let's talk about people. We live mostly on habits. We don't get up every day, thinking about that hard about what we're going to do. If you get up and have a cup of coffee, you just do it every day. It's sort of a habit. Some people wait and at 10 o'clock, they want to have a cup of coffee. Or how about the other one? It's 12 o'clock, time for lunch. It's not like we're hungry every day immediately at noon, as much as we're creatures of habit, and we go down that road. And what happens is we start to not look at other options. We get very, very comfortable with what we know.
Adam, do we get locked in?
Huh?
Do we get locked in?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We to our routine, and we get a very weird perception of risk. So I don't know if you remember years and years ago, whenever they would land an airplane, they would say, "You've just completed the safest part of your journey." And be careful when you get on the roadways. And that was true. Your odds of being killed in an airplane crash were very low. But up until a few years ago, I can remember every time you bought a plane ticket, they said, "Would you like to buy life insurance for that one airplane ride?" And there were little kiosks inside every single airport. Wow. And people would go into the airport and you could plunk down $5 or $10 and buy a $100,000 life insurance policy for that one airplane ride. That's all it covered. And people bought these things because they were fearful of airplane rides. And so they had to, the airlines were trying to say, well, this is the safest part of your journey. And now people don't think about it anymore, right? Now they're so used to airplanes flying, and there's so few crashes, and there's so many car crashes that people accept airplane flight as being relatively safe and even safer than car crashes.
Right.
But if I wind the clock back even further, and we go back to World War II, there was this phenomenon where they found that Army pilots would be out and a plane would get shot by the enemy, and they would crash land the plane, and almost always they would be killed. And there was this real question that was in the mind that after the war, they said, why didn't these pilots eject from the plane? Well, when they started to do research, at first they wanted to say it was a bravado. Oh, I think I can save the plane. I think this, and then it was like, no, this plane was not going to be saved. The engine's on fire, or the engine's gone out. You're over a bunch of trees. You're not going to save this plane. You are now into a crash landing. All you have to do is hit the ejector button. You get out of it. You save your life. But people didn't do that, and that was when they discovered that the pilots had more fear of the ejector button because they didn't know what would happen. If they hit the ejector button, it was going to be all new, all brand new. Here they are in a moment of crisis. Do I do the thing that I don't know anything about, which is hit an ejector button, or do I hope I can crash land this plane and save my life? Which was had a very low probability of success. So it was the fear of the unknown that kept them from being able to do the right thing. Well, from that, what we know is that one of the first things we have to recognize is education. Can you educate somebody about what the future is likely to look like? In the case of the pilots, they started putting them through various exercises that simulated an ejection. You would do it, from these simulators that they made, various kinds of physical simulators and later technology-based simulators, just to simulate what would happen in an ejection. And once they knew what was going to happen, how to do it, and what was going to happen, then we saw that it had shifted, and now very rarely does a pilot go down with a crash landing plane. They get out of the plane first, and they save their lives. And so one of the things we have to realize is that you have to experience the other alternatives. You have to go find out what's likely to happen. So in the case, let's take Joe Manchin. The people of West Virginia, there's a lot of people that are tied to coal. So what you say to them, okay, if we get rid of coal, what's going to happen with those people? Are they going to get new jobs? We've had a lot of experiences where regulation came in and we reduced the jobs in an area, and there was no replacement program. There was no investment in finding alternative jobs for those people. So if he agrees, okay, well, climate change is here, my state recognizes climate change, and okay, I'll go ahead and I'll agree that we're going to limit the use of coal and the mining of coal. And then there's no replacement jobs, he's in trouble. His benefactors, don't have, they're coal companies, they've been giving him money to run his campaign. Okay, they don't make as much money anymore. Who's going to pay for his campaign now, right? Is he going to get tech companies to start paying for his campaign when they don't have any jobs in West Virginia? So not knowing what the alternative is, we often stay stuck in our habit. And that's one of the very first things that led to what, as you just said, I call lock-in. Meaning we lock into where we are today. We lock into, how we've been in the past because our information about the future is so limited. And we often don't even know how to explore it. And that's why we constantly push people to do scenario planning, right? And we say, grab a hold of these trends and look out and see the future and go towards it. So here we have this issue of climate change and people saying, there's some people that just reject it. And it's like, why? Well, because they can't imagine a world that's different from the world today, right? It's hard for them to agree that, having everybody drive an electric car is good, or, changing how we produce electricity to put solar panels on our houses and rely on wind farms. They can't have faith in it because they're used to the old ways and old ways of how things do. And that's what I call behavioral lock-in. You get stuck in looking at things. The behaviors get repetitive and habit forming, and therefore you do them again and again. Now, we can apply that to corporations. How do you get behavioral lock-in in a corporation? Well, one thing is you keep talking to your existing customers. If you're talking to your existing customers, then they're not going to tell you to do something different. We had the experience of the people that make small offset printing presses. Along comes Xerox with xerography, and these are one-button printing machines, right? The administrator can put the paper on the machine, push a button, get 100 copies. The guys who made the offset printing presses, AM Multigraphics, AB Dick, those people had these small printing presses. But there, the administrator had to go down in the basement, give it to a printer. He had to make a plate, put it on the press, run it off, and then send it back. And it took more time. So what happened was you could look at it and you could say, okay, what's happening is the marketplace is starting to shift. But the people at the printers, AB Dick and AM Multigraphics and AB Dick, they were talking to printers in the basement. They weren't talking to the admins, right? They weren't talking to the people actually using the Xerox.
They were talking to the wrong customers, right?
Talking to the wrong customers. And that's one of the things we do in business. We get started talking to our current customers because we largely reward farming behavior in sales. We don't really, if you think about it, we'll say to a sales rep, gee, I'd like you to sell, can you get 5% more? Can you get 10% more? And the first reaction is, I want to call up all my biggest customers and try to get 5% more. I want to try to get 10% more of them. Because that's the easy thing to do. The hard thing to do is go find somebody that's not buying from you at all and seeing what they'll do. Can we go find somebody and bring on a new customer? So if you think about it, the effort to try to get a little bit more out of your existing customers, doing more of what you always did, pushing them a little bit harder, and just trying to eke out a little bit more. Right. Whereas if I said, well, I'm going to try to get 10% more by adding another customer, I got this big hill to climb. I've got to, get some kind of list, winnow down a list, make the sales call, find out their business, win their trust, get the initial small orders, make sure that those are executed, introduce customer service, and then after all that, I get this customer on board. But what we do is we don't reward somebody and say, okay, you know what, if you bring on a new customer, you're going to get an extra big hit. No, what we say is we pay a commission. And so the commission process reinforces selling.
Definitely flawed.
Yeah, selling to the existing.
I've got a really good example of so I've done sales my whole professional life practically, right? And the cost of acquiring a new customer is always bigger than the cost of maintaining your existing customers. That's a well-known fact. So a lot of people get in their head to just go there and pound the pavement with your existing customers. But what we tout at Spark Partners is not looking at just that. You've got to do scenario planning so you can look beyond those customers. And I'm going to use kind of a very simplistic example that I think will be relevant and also make a lot of sense. The whole Henry Ford thing, right? When he said to his, if you would have asked his customers, they would have said they want a faster horse. But the difference is, the difference that he really knew that nobody else knew, his customers weren't the horse owners.
Right.
They weren't the farmers. Yeah, the occasional farm would buy one of these, Model Ts or whatever. But his real customer was the mass market families, fathers and mothers and this and that, people that really want to close the gap between them and the rest of their family, or people that are doing, the lumber people or whatever. The whole landscape changed once he was able to realize that it's not the existing customers, it's a set of new customers.
Oh, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, and that's that lock-in. Okay, so look at what happened with climate change. We've got people locked in to who their voting constituency is, who their customers are, and they're saying, okay, somebody's got to do something, but it's not me, right? I'm not the one who's going to do it. And what happens is that now what happens with this lock-in is we start to have these sacred cows. So if you take the case of the printing machine companies I was talking about, what happened was they started to hate xerography and they rejected xerography, and they would go around saying how xerography was a bad thing because it was low quality and it was inefficient and it was more costly, which was all true. But the fact was it was a lot more convenient. But they made a sacred cow out of that printing press. I had, another good one was the Kodak with the film. The film, the amateur camera, we used this film, and so you had this, loyalty to the film whenever you started to have digital imagery capability, and, they were a big part of creating it. The problem was that, that sacred cow was the film. We couldn't do anything other than sell the film and give away the cameras, and practically give them away at very low price in order to sell film. So the film was the sacred cow. You don't do anything to hurt the sacred cow, so we don't go forward with the new technology. We don't go forward and try to do something new.
Right. So just like compare and contrast that to Netflix, that not only did they kill a sacred cow, but they brought a steak knife to the party. They went out and carved out a brand new market in the streaming. And I mean, there's kind of polar opposites, right? The whole Kodak, I can't believe that they're actually the ones who invented the digital camera, and they really didn't do anything with it.
Yeah. And then this is this whole issue of, okay, there's something new, there's a new alternative, but my habit is the old way, and I'm stuck in the old way, and how do I get stuck? Well, I get stuck by listening to customers. I get stuck by constantly trying to improve my existing technology or trying to reinforce my existing solution. And then that moves all the way to it was the not invented here. We start to get narrower and narrower in our thinking as the problem gets worse and worse, and we more desperately need to change. We'll tend to use lock-ins to actually give ourselves a worse blinders and do less. And we'll start going down into that not invented here situation. Anything that isn't invented internally, we're not going to take forward. So now you get people looking around and they come into the company and say, well, here's an option over here. And then they don't go for it. So like take a Walmart. You could see the development in electronic commerce, but Walmart wouldn't do anything about it for the longest time because they hadn't invented it. They hadn't developed it. And by the time they bought Jet, electronic commerce had been around for 25 years, and Amazon had an enormous lead on them, and it's really, really late. But, not invented here kept them from going out and getting the learnings and saying, hey, what can we do about making this happen? So this is how we lock in our organizations so that we say we're not going to do something new. So in case of government, for example, when we talk about problems like climate change, and another common one like this is healthcare, where they'll say, well, look at what happens in Canada, or look at what they've done in France, or look at what they've done in Australia. They'll have these companies, and then people will say, well, I don't care what happened in Australia. I don't care what they did in Canada. I don't care what they did in France. What are they saying? They're saying, well, it's not invented here. It wasn't invented in the United States. And we're unique. And therefore, we can't look around at other solutions. We cut off those options. And as I said, what I learned in the research I was doing 30 years ago that led to the book and everything else that we're doing today was that these are the ways we get ourselves stuck. And even when we see a problem like climate change, we'll ignore it, we'll refuse it, and we won't go forward to do anything about it. And then we just let our hierarchy of decision making and get in the way. We'll blame. So we can't get any laws passed just because Congress can't get anything done. It's the hierarchy. It's the decision making process. It's the founders created the Senate and the House of Representatives and the presidency, and it makes it impossible to get a decision made. Right? So we blame the organization and the for not getting anything done. But in fact, anybody can unlock those problems. They can be unlocked if you recognize that the problem is there and you really need to do something about it. But it's not human nature to go that direction. It is not human nature to seek out alternatives, to seek out a different way of getting the solution done, and to agree that what we're going to do is walk away from the old way of getting it done. And think about how many times you've been in a meeting, and a meeting could start off with, okay, we're going to talk about climate change. Everybody agrees. But then what happens as the meeting goes along is somebody says, well, I'm not sure that I trust the data from this source. Oh, I'm not sure that I trust what I heard from this other guy. And then what happens is there's a bit of divergence. We all say, well, we can't get anything done. Because why? Well, we're not going to do anything unless everyone agrees. We have to get consensus before we move forward. But consensus is the enemy of excellence. You're never going to get excellence by having a group of people try to design a car.
You're going to get the medium. You're going to get the middle.
Yeah, lowest common denominator is what you're going to get out of that. So what you have to do is realize in our organizations that when we're confronted with a serious problem and we want to try to move forward and we have to go get a different solution, it's not going to be done by consensus. It's going to be done by one individual or a small group of people who are really going to focus on this and drive the organization into a new direction. That's why we talk about white space teams all the time, or blank space teams, is because the organization is set, it's locked, it's problematic, and you've got to have this small group of people run out there, not building consensus, but building the new model, building the new answer, making the new thing happen. And so what we see happening today is that while Congress isn't getting anything done, there are a lot of states, municipalities working with their local electric utilities and forcing the direction of adding wind farms, forcing the direction of putting in place more solar panels and solar farms. And it's happening. It's happening slower. It's not happening as effectively. We're still having problems with blackouts in some states. We have problems with insufficient power. We have problems with wildfires that are caused by weak electrical systems. And that's because it's being done at the local and state level, and they don't have the resources we would at a federal level to get it done. But think of those teams, the people that have gone out and built those big solar farms or put in place the opportunity to put solar panels on roofs of houses and commercial buildings. Those are sort of the effect of the white space teams that are out there trying to address this problem today. And when they're funded well, they're successful. And that's what we need to think about in our own organizations, is that the behavioral lock-ins we have, including internal experts.
Right.
I don't know how many times I've talked to people in the electric utility industry who will sit there and say, you can't get from here to there with electric power. The sun doesn't shine every day and the wind doesn't blow every day, and therefore these sustainable utility products won't work. And that's just wrong. Those are people who were experts in how utility companies were built, how utilities were operated 40 years ago. They have built into them all the assumptions and everything that drove the building of larger and larger plants, that drove the construction of nuclear power plants, that drove the construction of coal and then later natural gas-fired plants. And they like transmission lines that go for 400 miles from plant to customer. And that's their mindset. That's their thinking. And as internal experts, they could never say, yeah, you know what? If we went to a modular distributed system where we suddenly had, every home had some solar panels, we had a few windmills scattered around on municipal locations, I could see how we could matrix that together, because then they're no longer the expert. Then they have to go, that'll work. And you know what? I'm sorry, but all my expertise is now becoming out of date. Yeah, who's going to do that? Nobody's going to do that. So when we look to the experts, we fail. That's what happened, with the rise of Virgin Atlantic. Whenever when Richard Branson said, hey, I'd like to have an airline, then he put a team onto it, and they went and talked to the experts, and they came back and said, it's going to take $15 million. And Branson said, I don't have $14 million. I'm sell records. I need to open an airline without any money.
He's got one, but they had to be very they had to get outside the box, then think. Right?
Exactly.
They had to really reframe the whole conversation.
They did.
To look beyond their status quo.
And when they did that, when they quit talking to the experts and said, how could I solve the problem of reservation system or acquiring a plane or getting a gate, and how could I do that outside the box, get out there, how could I try to do it, what would be a way to try to do it with no money down, they were able to solve the problem, right, as a team on their own, able to go forward. And so we can see that these lock-ins are what get our organization stuck. And what we don't do is enough of trying to figure out how to unstick the organization. And so right now what we have are in the United States for sure, we have governmental agencies at the federal level that are stuck. And now they're saying, well, you know what, we don't know how to fix this. We don't know how to go forward with it. And so they're letting all of these excuses keep them from moving forward. We also lock in structurally. We do most of our strategy looking in the rearview mirror rather than looking at new alternatives. That's why you and I say strategic planning is not about understanding your old customers. It's going out looking at trends, finding out what the trends are, finding out how to apply the trends. Yet, still to this day, and I've been talking this for 20 years, when I go to companies, almost all their strategic planning is really around tactical improvements of the business models that already exist. And then they'll say, well, our biggest strategy question is how big a distribution center to build. I'll be like, that's not strategic. That's a tactical question. Yeah, because the size, whether you have 4 smaller distribution centers or 1 big one, that's just it's how you're operating your existing model. The strategic question is there a whole new technology I should be working on? Is there an entirely different customer base I should be using? Should I try to approach solving the customer problem in an entirely different way? That is what's strategic, but we confuse big with strategic.
Yeah, I challenge any business owner, any executive to go to our website. We have a course that's $97 called Unlock Growth that talks about lock-in, talks about all these things that Adam and I are discussing right now. And I challenge you to, it's only about 2.5 hours of content split up in a couple of different modules that you're going to be able to really use before you go into one of these strategic planning meetings. And you're going to see a whole world of opportunity. The amount of hypocrisy that exists in the government and in business about, oh yeah, we're all focused on growth and we want to take this company to the next level, blah, blah, blah. But when you actually look at what they're doing day to day, it's not coherent. It's not the same. They're not happening in the right way. I
mean, in this podcast, we're not even going to cover half of the lock-ins. So the good thing about the course is we go through all of the lock-ins and how you mentally lock in, how you behaviorally lock in, get yourself into the habits and get your corporation into habits, how you structurally lock in with the investments you make, how you do your strategic planning. And then what happens is whenever the CEO or the head of the company or some people start saying, hey, we see a big problem in the future and we need to address that, or hey, here's a new solution like Kodak with the digital camera, that kind of idea, then what happens is you have to attack those lock-ins. You have to break away from those lock-ins. And part of it is having these white space teams, but that's only part of it. Because what happens is you can set forth a team to go out and solve the problem, but they could end up being a suicide squad that you send out there to do it, and then you don't give them any resources, and the organization falls back into its historical ways of behaving, and you don't help them out. They get way out in front of the Army, and they're calling for help, and they're left on their own out there, and they get annihilated, and then the Army sits back and says, yeah, well, fine, who cares? They were dumb to go out there in the first place. They never should have done it. And so there's a lot to really successfully move your organization forward. You need to understand how you get locked in. And I think right now today we're looking at this. And I mean, I go to organizations and I say, look how hot it is today, 110. And so climate change is here, folks, or hey, look, we just had a 500-year flood at some location, or hey, look, we just, for wintertime we had an Arctic blast where it was sub-zero in Chicago for 2 weeks. All these impacts, wildfires in the western United States. We just burned up about half of New Mexico this spring. We've got wildfires right now happening in Texas where it's very uncommon. Day after day of record temperatures in Oklahoma, Texas, and even up in the Dakotas, temperatures above 40 degrees C, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Unheard of sorts of things. And I'll say, are you thinking about that in your strategic planning? And I'll get, no. I'll say, so you think climate change doesn't affect you? It's impossible for it to not affect you. So you have to start to look at that and say, how might it affect us? And then how am I going to deal with it? And if you start to see the answer, then you have to start saying, why have I put blinders on? What caused me to have those blinders? And change it. Can you find the new customers? Where could you go to find the next step of what you want to do? If you're out there in the business of selling, livestock products, then it's easy to deny the fact that people are eating more plant-based proteins. It's easy to deny or just not pay attention to the shift to veganism and vegetarianism and how that might impact long-term your markets, because livestock markets are going to alter. But you see that's 2 steps away, so therefore, hey, I'm not going to really put that in my strategic planning. That's just a lock-in. It's a lock-in in your strategic planning process, and this course will tell you how to change that. Right? How to change each one of those lock-ins that are holding you in place, unlock them. How to unlock them so you can push through and get yourself out there into the new markets, new customers, new solutions to get back to growing your business.
Very well said, Adam. Yeah, there's a lot to the process. It takes lots of information. It takes some confidence to actually move in that direction. I think that's a lot of what business leaders lack. They might be confident in their, like you mentioned earlier, in their own domain, but when they have to stretch out to a new domain, they don't have that confidence. They don't know what they don't know. And so this is part of this course, the Unlock Growth course, as well as the masterclass, Think Innovation. It really opens your eye to a bigger world where you start to understand what you don't know, and you start to have the tools now to fill in those gaps. So there's a lot to be discussed, and I know we didn't cover everything today with respect to lock-in, but we got a good flavor of it. And any final thoughts here, Adam, before we log off for this week?
I just got back from Vegas where you could gamble away $100 in 5 minutes without even thinking about it, or you could buy 4 cocktails, and that's $100 gone. And I just sit there and say, for $100, you don't want to understand how your organization's locked in? I'm sorry, this is like the easiest $100 you should ever spend in your life.
Great. All right, Adam, well, have a good rest of the week. We'll be seeing you next week.
Thank you.